The summer was supposed to be a break from everything, a chance for Emma to clear her mind and escape the chaos of her college life. At 21, she had spent the past semester buried in exams, juggling late-night study sessions and early morning lectures. Her parents, Mark and Caroline, suggested a stay at her grandmother's beach house, a family retreat that had always been her haven growing up. "Go," her father had said with an encouraging smile. "You've earned this." Her mother had been equally supportive. "We'll take care of everything here. Just enjoy yourself." It had seemed like a perfect plan. The seaside home was nestled on a quiet stretch of beach, with a wraparound porch overlooking the ocean, and walls filled with the echoes of happy summers past. Emma arrived in early June, the house just as she remembered, warm and inviting, with the faint scent of salt and old wood lingering in the air. The first week was bliss. Emma fell into a rhythm of morning swims and long walks along the shore. She spent afternoons reading on the porch swing and evenings watching sunsets that painted the sky in shades of pink and gold. For the first time in months, she felt truly at peace. But as the days turned into weeks, subtle changes began to creep into her daily routine. Emma's father had always been attentive. He texted her often, checking in on how she was enjoying her time away. But now his messages felt different. They were shorter, less frequent, and lacked his usual warmth. "How's the beach? Don't forget sunscreen. Everything's fine here." Emma brushed it off at first, telling herself he was just busy with work. But when she called her mother one evening, she noticed something else, an unfamiliar tension in her voice. "How are you, Mom?" Emma asked, trying to keep the conversation light. "Oh, fine," Caroline replied quickly. "Just busy, you know. Lots to do." Emma frowned. Her mother was rarely this dismissive. "Busy with what?" "Oh, the usual," Caroline said vaguely. "Anyway, how are you? Are you eating enough? Getting enough sleep?" The deflection was obvious, but Emma decided not to push. Her mother was probably just stressed. She made a mental note to check in more often. One evening, while scrolling through her social media feed, Emma stumbled upon a photo posted by a family friend. It was taken at a dinner party at her parents' house, a casual gathering with familiar faces seated around the dining table. Her father stood at the head, smiling warmly, a glass of wine in hand. But it wasn't the photo itself that caught Emma's attention. It was the caption, "A wonderful evening with Mark and his charming guest." Guest? Emma thought. Her curiosity piqued. Her parents rarely entertained strangers. Who could it be? She zoomed in on the photo, trying to identify everyone in the frame. Her mother was there, smiling as usual, but sitting beside her father was a woman Emma didn't recognize. Dark-haired, elegant, and poised. She stood out in a way that made Emma's stomach twist uncomfortably. She dismissed the feeling, telling herself she was overthinking. It was probably a new coworker or an old friend. Still, the image lingered in her mind longer than she liked. A few days later, another post appeared, this time from one of her father's colleagues. It was taken at an office event, and once again, the mysterious woman was there. This time, she wasn't just sitting beside her father, she was standing close to him, her hand resting lightly on his arm. The caption read, "An evening to remember with incredible company." Emma's chest tightened. It wasn't just the physical proximity that bothered her. It was the look in the woman's eyes, a mix of warmth and something more intimate. And her father. He seemed too comfortable, too familiar with her presence. Emma tried calling her parents that night, but neither answered. Her mother's phone went straight to voicemail, and her father's rang endlessly before cutting off. She sat on the couch, staring at her phone, unease curling in her stomach like a knot. Who is she wondered, and why hasn't anyone mentioned her? The following day, her father finally returned her call. His voice sounded cheerful, almost too cheerful, as though he were trying to compensate for the delay. "Hey, Emma, sorry I missed your call. Work's been crazy." "No worries," she said, trying to keep her tone casual. "How are things at home?" Great. he replied quickly. Nothing new to report. How's the beach? It's been nice, Emma said, hesitating before adding. I saw some pictures online. Looked like you've been hosting a lot of dinners lately. There was a brief pause on the other end. Oh, those, he said lightly. Just some work events. You know how it is. Who's the woman in the photos? Emma asked, her heart pounding. What woman? He asked, his tone carefully neutral. The one sitting next to you in the dinner photo, Emma pressed. And in the office photo, she seemed close. Oh, that's Sophia, he said, his voice unnaturally casual. She's a client. I've been working with her on a big project. Emma didn't miss the slight edge in his voice, the way he seemed to brush off the question too quickly. She seemed more than just a client, Emma said quietly. Her father chuckled, though it sounded forced. Don't be ridiculous, Emma. You're reading too much into things. Am I? She asked, her unease growing. Look, he said, his tone firmer now. There's nothing to worry about. Just focus on enjoying your summer, okay? The call ended shortly after, but the unease remained. Emma couldn't shake the feeling that her father wasn't telling her everything. And as the weeks went on, that feeling only grew stronger. By the time Emma's summer came to an end, her once idyllic retreat had been overshadowed by unanswered questions and a growing sense of dread. She packed her bags and headed home, determined to uncover the truth. The house she returned to felt different, quieter, heavier, as though it was holding its breath. Her mother greeted her warmly, but her father was nowhere to be seen. He's out running errands, Caroline explained, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. Emma forced a smile in return, but inside, her unease deepened. She wasn't sure what she'd find, but she knew one thing. Her family was hiding something. And whatever it was about to come to light. When Emma stepped back into her childhood home, she felt an immediate shift in the atmosphere. It wasn't just the quiet. There was a sense of something unspoken lingering in the air. The house, once filled with warmth and familiarity, now felt heavy, as though it were holding secrets between its walls. Her mother, Caroline, greeted her with a smile that seemed too bright, too forced. You're home, she said, pulling Emma into a tight hug. We've missed you. Where's Dad? Emma asked, glancing around. He's out, Caroline said quickly, releasing her. Running some errands. Emma noted the way her mother's hands fidgeted, how her eyes darted to the clock on the wall. Something about her demeanor felt off. How's everything been? Emma asked casually, following her mother into the kitchen. Oh, you know, Caroline said, busying herself with a pot of coffee. Same old, nothing exciting. Emma hesitated, then decided to test the waters. I saw some pictures from a dinner party you had. Looked like fun. Caroline froze for a split second before continuing to pour the coffee. Oh, yes. That was a while ago. Just some friends from work. And Sophia? Emma pressed, watching her mother closely. Who is she? The name hung in the air like a thunderclap. Caroline's smile faltered, her hands tightening around the coffee pot. She's someone your father knows from work, she said finally, her voice strained. Why do you ask? No reason, Emma said quickly, though her heart was racing. Her mother's reaction confirmed what she had suspected. Sophia wasn't just a random client or a passing acquaintance. She meant something more. That evening, while her parents were in their separate corners of the house, Emma found herself wandering into her father's study. It had always been his sanctuary, a place he retreated to when he needed to work or unwind. The room smelled faintly of leather and paper, the familiar scent bringing a pang of nostalgia. She wasn't sure what she was looking for, maybe answers, or at least something to confirm the nagging feeling that something wasn't right. She opened a drawer, rifling through old papers and notebooks. Most of it seemed innocuous. bills, work notes, and loose photographs. But then her fingers brushed against something unusual, a small, leather-bound notebook, its edges worn as though it had been handled often. She pulled it out. Her curiosity piqued. The first page contained a date from 6 months ago, written in her father's neat handwriting. The entry began innocently enough, with notes about a work project and a mention of dinner with a client. But as she turned the pages, the tone shifted. Met with Sophia again today. She's incredible. Her insight on the project is unmatched, but it's more than that. She makes me feel seen. Emma's heart sank as she continued reading. The entries became more personal, more intimate. Dinner with Sophia tonight. I should feel guilty, but I don't. She's everything I didn't know I was missing. The words blurred as tears filled Emma's eyes. The father she had idolized, the man she had trusted implicitly, had been hiding something monumental. He wasn't just working late or hosting dinners for clients. He was seeing someone, emotionally, if not physically, and it was clear this connection went beyond mere friendship. Emma heard the front door open and close, followed by her father's familiar footsteps. She quickly shoved the notebook back into the drawer and closed it, her heart pounding. She wasn't ready to confront him. Not yet. She needed more time to process what she had found. Mark appeared in the doorway moments later, his face lighting up when he saw her. "Emma," he said warmly, pulling her into a hug. "It's good to have you home." "You too, Dad," she said, forcing a smile. "Everything okay?" he asked, his gaze searching hers. "Of course," she lied, stepping back. "Just tired from the trip." Mark nodded, his smile faltering slightly. "Well, get some rest. We'll catch up tomorrow." As he left the room, Emma felt a pang of guilt. She hated keeping secrets, especially from her parents, but she knew she couldn't confront him without a plan. For now, she would wait and watch. The next morning, Emma decided to keep an eye on her father's behavior. She noticed the way he seemed distracted, glancing at his phone more often than usual. He would step outside to take calls, his voice low and hurried, and return with an expression that was hard to read. It wasn't long before Emma found her first real clue. While cleaning up after breakfast, she noticed his phone buzzing on the counter. A text message lit up the screen. The sender's name unmistakable: Sophia. Her heart pounded as she read the preview of the message. "Looking forward to tonight? Same place as last time?" Emma quickly stepped away as Mark entered the kitchen, grabbing his phone and slipping it into his pocket without a word. His nonchalance only added fuel to her suspicions. That evening, Emma pretended to go to bed early. Instead, she waited until she heard her father leave the house, the sound of his car pulling out of the driveway echoing in the quiet night. She grabbed her keys and followed at a safe distance, her hands gripping the wheel tightly. Mark drove to a small, upscale restaurant on the outskirts of town. Emma parked across the street, her heart racing as she watched him walk inside. A few minutes later, Sophia appeared, dressed elegantly, her smile lighting up the room as she greeted him. Emma felt a lump rise in her throat as she watched them talk, their body language unmistakably close. She had seen enough. With tears streaming down her face, she drove home, her mind racing with questions. Back at the house, Emma sat in the dark, her thoughts a chaotic mess. She couldn't believe what she had witnessed. Her father, the man she had trusted more than anyone, sharing an intimate dinner with another woman while her mother remained blissfully unaware. The weight of the truth pressed down on her, suffocating in its intensity. She knew she couldn't keep this to herself forever, but how could she tell her mother? How could she confront her father without tearing their family apart? As the night stretched on, Emma realized there was no easy answer. The truth was out there, and sooner or later, it would come to light. All she could do now was brace herself for the storm. The morning after her discovery, Emma barely slept. Her thoughts were a whirlwind of anger, sadness, and disbelief. Her father's betrayal felt personal, as if it wasn't just her mother he had deceived, but her as well. She spent the early hours pacing her room, trying to decide what to do next. By the time the sun rose, she knew she couldn't keep this inside any longer. Her father was in the kitchen, sipping his coffee and scrolling through his phone when she entered. He looked up and smiled. "Morning? Kiddo? Sleep okay?" "Not really," Emma said, her voice tight. She dropped the leather-bound notebook onto the table with a thud, watching as his face shifted from confusion to alarm. "What's this?" he asked, though his tone already betrayed him. "You tell me," Emma replied, crossing her arms. "I found it in your study." Mark's hands hesitated over the notebook before he reached for it, his face pale. "Emma, I can explain." "Go ahead," she said, her voice trembling. "Explain how you've been writing about some other woman while Mom's at home thinking everything's fine." Mark exhaled slowly, setting the notebook down without opening it. "It's not what you think," he began. "Then what is it?" Emma snapped. "Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you're having an affair." "It's complicated," he said, avoiding her gaze. "That's not an answer," Emma shot back, her voice rising. "You've been lying to Mom, to me, to all of us. Who is Sophia?" Mark rubbed his temples, clearly struggling with how much to say. "She's someone I've been working with," he said finally. "It started professionally, but over time, we got closer. Too close." "So you admit it," Emma said, her voice breaking. "You've been cheating on Mom." "No," he said quickly. "It hasn't gone that far, it's not physical. But I won't deny there's an emotional connection." "That doesn't make it better, Dad," Emma said, tears streaming down her face. "You betrayed her. You betrayed us." Mark's face crumpled, and for the first time, Emma saw genuine remorse in his eyes. "I know I've made a mistake," he said. "I never wanted to hurt your mother, or you. But things between me and your mom have been difficult. We've been distant for years. Emma, this doesn't excuse what I've done. But it's the truth." Emma shook her head, stepping back as if the distance might help her process the words. "Why didn't you talk to her?" she asked. "Why didn't you try to fix things instead of running to someone else?" "I tried," Mark said, his voice heavy. "But every time I brought it up, we ended up fighting or sweeping it under the rug. I was lonely. Emma, I felt invisible." "That's not an excuse," Emma said firmly. "Mom deserved better. We deserved better." "I know," he whispered, "and I'm going to make this right." "How?" Emma asked, her voice sharp. "By pretending this never happened? By lying to Mom even more?" Mark flinched at her words, his silence speaking volumes. Emma felt her anger boiling over. But beneath it was a deep well of sadness. This wasn't the man she thought she knew. The man who had always been her rock, her protector, had crumbled before her eyes. That evening, Emma wrestled with what to do next. Her father had begged her not to say anything to her mother, insisting he needed time to figure things out. But Emma wasn't sure she could keep the secret. Every time she looked at her mother, she felt the weight of the truth pressing down on her. When Caroline returned from work, Emma watched her move around the house, completely unaware of the storm brewing beneath the surface. She wanted to tell her, to spare her from the lies, but the thought of breaking her heart was unbearable. Later that night, Emma confronted her father again. "You need to tell her," she said. "She deserves to hear this from you." "I will," Mark promised. "But I need time. Please." Emma, let me do this my way. You don't have much time, Emma warned, because if you don't tell her, I will. Despite her father's plea, Emma couldn't hold it in any longer. A few days later, while helping her mother prepare dinner, the truth came tumbling out. Mom, she began hesitantly, there's something I need to tell you. Caroline turned, her smile fading at the serious tone in Emma's voice. What is it? Emma hesitated, tears welling up in her eyes. It's about Dad. And Sophia. The name hit Caroline like a physical blow. She froze, her face paling. What about her? She asked, her voice barely audible. Emma swallowed hard, her hands trembling. He's been seeing her. I don't know how far it's gone. But it's more than just work. For a moment, Caroline didn't move. Then, slowly, she set down the knife she had been holding and turned to face Emma fully. How do you know this? She asked, her voice shaking. I found his notebook, Emma admitted. He's been writing about her, about how she makes him feel, about their meetings. I'm so sorry, Mom. Caroline closed her eyes, her breath hitching. When she opened them again, they were filled with a mix of pain and determination. Thank you for telling me, she said quietly. I need to talk to your father. That night, Caroline confronted Mark. Their voices carried through the house, a symphony of anger, betrayal, and heartbreak. Emma stayed in her room, listening to the muffled shouts and the sound of her mother's sobs. It was the hardest night of her life. When the house finally fell silent, Emma crept downstairs to find her mother sitting at the kitchen table, her face streaked with tears. Mark was nowhere to be seen. What happens now? Emma asked softly. Caroline looked at her, her eyes red but resolute. I don't know, she said, but this family will never be the same. The days following Caroline's confrontation with Mark were tense and filled with uncertainty. Mark had moved into the guest room, his belongings hastily packed into suitcases that now sat at the foot of the bed. The once lively and warm atmosphere of the house had been replaced by silence, punctuated only by the occasional muffled conversation or the sound of someone moving about. Emma felt like she was walking on eggshells. She tried to stay out of her parents' way, but the guilt of being the one to expose the truth weighed heavily on her. Every time she saw her mother's pained expression or her father's hollow eyes, she wondered if she had done the right thing. One evening, Emma found her mother sitting in the living room, staring blankly at the television. A glass of wine sat untouched on the coffee table, and her shoulders sagged with exhaustion. Mom, Emma said softly, sitting down beside her. I'm so sorry. I didn't want to hurt you. Caroline turned to her daughter, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. Emma, don't apologize, she said, her voice trembling. You did the right thing. If you hadn't told me, I don't know how long I would have been in the dark. But it's tearing us apart, Emma said, her voice breaking. I didn't want this to happen. This isn't your fault, Caroline said firmly. Your father made his choices, not you. And while it hurts, I needed to know. I needed to face the truth. Emma nodded, tears streaming down her face as her mother pulled her into a tight embrace. For the first time in days, she felt a sliver of comfort. The next day, Mark approached Caroline while she was preparing dinner. He stood in the doorway, hesitant, his hands shoved into his pockets. Can we talk? He asked quietly. Caroline didn't look up. What's there to talk about? Mark? Everything, he said, stepping into the kitchen. I know I've hurt you. I know I've broken your trust. But I want to fix this. I want to fix us. Caroline let out a bitter laugh, finally turning to face him. "Fix us," she repeated. "Do you even understand what you've done? You didn't just betray me. Mark, you betrayed our family. You betrayed the life we built together." "I know," Mark said, his voice thick with emotion. "And I'll spend the rest of my life making it up to you if you'll let me. I'll cut ties with Sophia. I'll go to therapy. I'll do whatever it takes." Caroline stared at him for a long moment, her expression unreadable. "Finally," she sighed. "It's not that simple. Mark, you've shattered something I'm not sure can be repaired. And even if it can, it's going to take time." Mark nodded, his shoulders slumping. "I'll give you all the time you need," he said. "Just, please don't give up on us." Emma watched her parents' interactions from the sidelines, torn between anger and pity. She hated what her father had done, but she couldn't deny the pain she saw in his eyes. He looked like a man carrying the weight of the world on his shoulders, desperate to make amends, but unsure how. One evening, Mark found Emma sitting on the porch swing, staring out at the fading light. He sat down beside her, the silence between them stretching like a chasm. "I'm sorry, Emma," he said finally, "for everything. I never wanted to hurt you." Emma didn't look at him. "You didn't just hurt me, Dad. You hurt Mom. You hurt all of us." "I know," he said quietly. "And I hate myself for it." "Then why did you do it?" Emma asked, her voice trembling. "Why wasn't our family enough for you?" Mark hesitated, his gaze fixed on the horizon. "I wish I had a good answer," he said. "I was lonely. Emma, I felt like your mom and I were drifting apart, like we were just going through the motions. And then Sophia came along, and she made me feel alive again, but it was a mistake. The biggest mistake of my life." Emma turned to him, her eyes filled with tears. "You should have talked to Mom. You should have fought for us." "I know," he said, his voice breaking. "And I'll regret not doing that for the rest of my life." Caroline, meanwhile, began to find her own strength amidst the chaos. She confided in her closest friends, sought the guidance of a therapist, and began to focus on herself in a way she hadn't in years. Slowly but surely, she started to reclaim her sense of independence. One evening, as she and Emma sat together, Caroline shared her thoughts. "I don't know if I can forgive him," she admitted. "But I do know that I'm stronger than I thought. And no matter what happens, we're going to be okay." Emma nodded, her admiration for her mother growing with every passing day. "We'll get through this," she said. "Together." The house remained a place of tension and uncertainty, but there were small moments of hope. Mark respected Caroline's request for space, throwing himself into therapy and making every effort to prove his commitment to repairing the damage he had caused. Caroline, while cautious, allowed herself to entertain the possibility of forgiveness, if only for the sake of their family. And Emma, though still grappling with her own feelings, began to find solace in the love and resilience she saw in her mother. She knew the road ahead would be long and difficult, but for the first time, she believed they could navigate it together. The weeks that followed were some of the most difficult Emma's family had ever faced. The weight of Mark's betrayal lingered in every conversation, every shared meal, every moment of silence. Yet, amidst the pain, there were glimpses of hope, a shared laugh, an honest discussion, a hesitant but genuine effort to move forward. Caroline had insisted on boundaries. Mark continued to sleep in the guest room, giving her the space she needed to process her emotions. They both began therapy, individually at first, and then as a couple. For Caroline, it was a way to reclaim her identity and process the heartbreak. For Mark, it was a chance to confront his actions and the deeper issues that had driven him to seek solace in another woman. For Emma, the process was slower. she found herself vacillating between anger and a longing for the stability they had lost. She couldn't forget the betrayal, but she also couldn't ignore the small ways her father was trying to make amends. One evening, Mark approached Emma in the kitchen. He looked hesitant, almost nervous, as he leaned against the counter. "Can we talk?" he asked softly. Emma shrugged, focusing on the plate she was washing. "What is there to talk about?" "Everything," he said, his voice laced with sincerity. "I know I've hurt you, Emma, and I know it's going to take time, but I want to rebuild what we had." Emma turned to face him, her expression guarded. "You can't just erase what you did. Dad, you broke our trust." "I know," he said, his voice breaking. "But I'm not giving up. I'll spend the rest of my life proving to you and your mother that I can do better. That I am better." His words hung in the air, heavy with emotion. Emma nodded slowly, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "I hope you mean that," she said, "because we deserve better." Caroline, meanwhile, and faced a crossroads. The love she had once felt for Mark was still there, but it was buried beneath layers of hurt and betrayal. She spent hours in therapy, wrestling with the question of whether forgiveness was possible or even desirable. One evening, she sat Emma down at the dining table, her expression calm but serious. "Emma," she began, "I've made a decision." Emma's heart raced. "What is it?" Caroline took a deep breath. "I've decided to stay with your father. Not because I've fully forgiven him, but because I believe in the family we built together. He's shown me that he's willing to change, and I'm willing to give him that chance, for now." Emma nodded, her emotions conflicted. "Do you think it'll work?" "I don't know," Caroline admitted, "but I'm willing to try. And if it doesn't, at least I'll know I did everything I could." With Caroline's decision came a shift in the family dynamic. Mark threw himself into therapy, working to rebuild trust and show his commitment to his wife and daughter. He ended all contact with Sophia, sending her a final message to make it clear that their relationship, whatever it had been, was over. The road to healing was anything but smooth. There were arguments, tears, and moments of doubt. But there were also moments of progress. A family dinner where laughter returned, a quiet evening spent watching old movies together, a heartfelt apology from Mark that left both Caroline and Emma in tears. Emma found herself slowly warming to her father again. She saw the effort he was making, the genuine remorse in his actions. While the pain of his betrayal would never fully disappear, she began to believe that people could change, that love, though fragile and could survive even the deepest wounds. By the end of the summer, the family was in a better place. They weren't perfect, far from it, but they were trying. Caroline and Mark continued their therapy sessions, finding ways to reconnect and rebuild their marriage. Emma, too, found solace in therapy, using it as a tool to process her own emotions and navigate her complicated relationship with her father. One evening, as the three of them sat on the porch watching the sunset, Emma felt a sense of peace she hadn't experienced in months. The wounds were still there, but they were healing, slowly but surely. "I'm proud of us," Caroline said quietly, breaking the silence. "We've been through so much, but we're still here, still fighting." Emma nodded, a small smile playing on her lips. "We're stronger than I thought." Mark looked at both of them, his eyes filled with gratitude. "Thank you," he said, his voice thick with emotion, "for giving me another chance. I promise I won't waste it." And for the first time, Emma believed him. The journey wasn't over, but it was moving in the right direction. The family's story was one of heartbreak and betrayal, but also of resilience and redemption. It was a testament to the power of honesty, forgiveness, and the willingness to fight for what mattered most. As Emma prepared to return to college, she felt a newfound sense of hope, not just for her family, but for herself. She had learned that love wasn't perfect, that people weren't perfect, but that didn't mean they weren't worth